Yo, what happened to this box?
I have no one to blame but myself for my complete dismissal and ignorance towards the Resident Evil series. I just went about avoiding it until the most recent installment, genuinely because I just didn't know where or how to start. Like, there's just too much. I couldn't focus in on one thing to dedicate my time to. I found the earlier games in particular really intimidating with the limited save system, making your saves a consumable item in the form of ink ribbons for the typewriter, and just the way my personal life is, having to chase around a pair of little hellraisers! I mean, beautiful children. Having a game be pick up and play is incredibly important and a major factor in my decision on what game to play next. But like, I have owned these 3 games for a very long time and I've just done nothing with any of them. And before anyone thinks I abuse my games, I bought it this way for like £1 or something. And shockingly, it actually works, even if the cutscenes can freeze for up to 5 minutes.
It's my love of Resident Evil 8 that's pushed me to explore this series, and it just makes sense to start from the beginning.
After a few agonising attempts to play the barely functioning disc, I went with the director's cut, released in 1997 for this review instead. It's a reworked release of the original, which was intended to bridge the gap between the release of Resident Evil 1 and its sequel, with different item and enemy placement. It features difficulty settings too, which is mad that this wasn't a thing initially, but the biggest draw for me was the increase in the amount of ink ribbons and not needing to ration my saves. Resident Evil wasn't Capcom's first foray into survival horror. In fact, that came 7 years earlier with the game adaptation of the film Sweet Home. This little guy is like the granddaddy of survival horror, becoming the influence for Resident Evil, which incorporated many of its elements, such as limited inventory space and puzzle-focused gameplay. In fact, a lot of the elements that Sweet Home introduced have ended up being tropes of early survival horror games. And while this is a vital piece of history in the world of horror, this ain't gonna be one I'll play though, when the main antagonist is a vengeful ghost of a mourning mother, and y'all know how triggered I get by dead kids, so no Sweet Home for me. Resident Evil is packed full of influence and homage, whether it be the zombie threat inspired by the films of George Romero, the pre-rendered backgrounds in the mansion resembling the Overlook Hotel from The Shining, or even the fixed camera angles of Alone in the Dark. Bits and pieces of inspiration have been sliced together to create something that is familiar yet groundbreaking and new. And in March 1996, this iconic franchise was born with a successful release receiving commercial and critical acclaim.
I know I'm like the latest attendee to this party, but I don't know, it seems kind of fun to look at this overwhelmingly successful and iconic game franchise as a newcomer in 2021. Like, how can a horror fan even utter that sentence? I feel like a sham.
The intro cutscene is this wonderfully awful live-action sequence, following the members of the STARS Alpha team led by Albert Wesker as they go in search for the Bravo team who went missing in the outskirts of Raccoon City whilst investigating a series of murders involving cannibalism. Soon upon arriving, the group are attacked and flee to safety, taking shelter in the nearby Spencer Mansion. And if you don't simp for live-action Chris Redfield, then you're a liar. The team are split up into groups depending on what character you choose to play as, and your protagonist is attacked by a zombie, feasting on the remains of one of the Bravo team's members. Thus begins our journey to unravel the mystery of the Spencer Mansion and the monsters that reside within. There's 2 scenarios to play through here, either as Jill Valentine or Chris Redfield. Jill has less health but 2 extra inventory slots as well as a lockpick and access to the bazooka. Chris has more health. That's about all he's got going for him, to be honest. Both scenarios are pretty identical gameplay-wise. You'll still be exploring the same places, but the order of these places differs slightly when initially exploring the mansion. The only real difference is your partner and the interactions you have with them. These interactions can in turn affect the ending of the game, so experimenting with different decisions is interesting in terms of a story perspective. Like any good early survival horror game, we have fixed camera angles and pre-rendered backgrounds. These led to a couple of fun jump scares when your field of vision is narrowed to what the game decides it wants you to see, and then a zombie just appears in front of you. Oh, you bastard. The mansion setting lends itself to a tight corridor design. Coupled with the fixed camera angles, this gives a unique claustrophobic feel. I honestly love games that implement fixed camera angles. Removing control in any scenario is always anxiety-inducing, but doing it this way doesn't feel cheap at all. You need to stop and listen to your surroundings using more than just your sight alone to try and determine if there's a threat. Hearing the pitter-patter of footsteps and edging into the camera's view to try and get a look. I fucking love survival horror, mate. And of course, to help in the manoeuvring around these fixed camera angles are tank controls, and I am one of those people that really get on board with them. I think games with this camera system need tank controls, otherwise navigating can be disorienting with the constantly changing perspective. With tank controls, up is always going to move you forward regardless of which way you're facing, so it makes moving more streamlined. They can take a little while to get used to, but I've played enough games with them at this point that I really have a feel for it. Fighting your enemies can be done with either a series of well-timed melee attacks with a knife, which I honestly couldn't get a good feel for in like any game, to be honest, not just this one, or using a gun, of which there is a variety to be found. Although especially in the initial stages, you'll be saving your precious ammo when either fighting with the combat knife or avoiding confrontation entirely. I think in this case the knife combat could have been easier to pick up if there was a quick turn button. You can back up away from danger but slowly, so you'll eventually be caught, and turning is so slow. Quick turn is usually something quite standard to have with tank controls, and I did find its absence a little odd, but it was by no means a deal breaker, especially when my ammo reserves built up to a point I didn't have to use the knife at all and could keep my distance. Gameplay also focuses on exploration and puzzle solving, finding various keys and opening up doors to be able to delve deeper into the mansion, deciphering notes found in various rooms and using items found in specific locations to also progress further. But we can only carry a certain number of items at any one time, including our weapon of choice and any ammo we need for it. There's several safe rooms dotted around the mansion and its grounds with item boxes to drop extra stuff into. They're all interconnected too, so whatever you put away, you will always be able to access in any other safe room. Managing story progression items and consumables is important, and ensuring there's space in your inventory for any items you may find along the way is essential for those wanting to reduce any unnecessary backtracking. And that's where playing as Jill really has a huge advantage. The 2 extra inventory slots she has make a huge difference when exploring. Coupled with her lockpick, she is by far the superior character. The lockpick can be used to unlock drawers and desks, and even some doors in the mansion, saving more inventory space that would be taken up by keys if playing as Chris. And he is just an idiot in general. What do you mean you can't handle chemicals? Jill just put them in a bottle. What is wrong with you, you miserable fuck? And instead of the bazooka, he gets the flamethrower, which is literal shit. The bazooka is about 86 times better range and different ammo types. Like, what use is this fucking flamethrower? But even with those extra inventory slots, I still did a lot of backtracking as Jill during my first playthrough. There's a lot of key items and keys during the first section of the game, and not knowing exactly where and when they'll be needed is a handicap in terms of inventory management. I found myself going back and forth a huge amount to the safe room to retrieve items and drop off excess ammo and healing I'd come across during my exploration, which did feel a little tiring, especially when I had to sit through all the door opening animations. But I really enjoyed figuring out how to use all these items and understanding the objective at hand. The first section sees you collecting 4 crests to open the door into the courtyard. The way you can do this is fairly open-ended too. On my third playthrough, I tried to plan out a route to make it more efficient, and tested myself to see if I could do it without having to use the item boxes in the safe room. It was by far my favourite part of the game. Really clever design, executed superbly with a number of strategies and routes to implement. But I could not imagine doing this on my first playthrough if it was Chris though. The extra items but less inventory space would have drove me to distraction. But I think if you're going to play through both scenarios, Jill before Chris is the way to go, so you already have a handle on what does what and where. I found once venturing into the wider grounds of the mansion, the exploration becomes a little more linear. I mean, it still had my brain ticking over, especially when going for the best ending, which had additional objectives to complete, but it's nowhere near as open-ended as the initial section. But all in all, I loved the whole setting. The design of the mansion being vast and memorable. I don't really know why, but I particularly like this balcony. Maybe it's the Overlook Hotel vibes, I don't know, but I just love looking at it. I'm so weird. And the wider area just escalates into some batshit stuff with underground tunnels and secret labs. It's absolute lunacy, which keeps all the areas distinct, but they still manage to be relevant and in context with the game. The pre-rendered backgrounds are stunning as well. I love the colours, the decoration, the magnificence of the mansion they convey. They're a feast for the eyes. It's not a particularly scary setting though. That could just be the dated nature of the graphics, but I never really felt a sense of dread. As the enemies got more disturbing and harder to deal with, the anxiety level did go up a bit, but like, the hunters look so funny. They're so bloody cute! I still did get caught a few times with jump scares though, and the tyrant is mad looking. And that bloody shark coming for me! Ah! But for 1996, this is all super impressive. Even something as silly as the item coming into view in your inventory is special. What's not so great is the voice acting. It is painfully bad, but in the most amazing way. So much of this is iconic with your Jill sandwiches and whatnot. And by the way, I was ready for the Jill sandwich line. I was not ready for her reaction to it. so jovial, like, mate, you're almost crushed by a saw trap, and you're just like, I know, right? The bad delivery and corny writing does kind of dull the spooky shine and takes it more into a goofy action movie realm. I have no idea if that was the intention, but there is no way this was meant to be taken seriously with lines like, "We got to the root of the problem after fighting a giant plant."
Spoiler warning for the 25-year-old game. Skip to here if you want to avoid the things that literally everybody knows about.
Further investigation, we discover that the monsters that lurk are those infected with the T-virus, a highly contagious virus developed by the researchers in the mansion working under the Umbrella Corporation. Captain Albert Wesker is revealed to be a double agent working for Umbrella and leads us to the super soldier known as the Tyrant. Wesker releases the Tyrant only for it to turn on him and kill him. We fight the Tyrant and then begin our escape from the mansion. Our partner activates the self-destruct system and now we have 3 minutes before the whole mansion is blown up. As the helicopter is about to land and rescue us, the Tyrant reappears. A rocket launcher is dropped from the helicopter and we use it to blow up the Tyrant before boarding the helicopter and escaping. There's a few endings here to get. The best one sees Chris, Jill and your partner escaping. You can save either Chris or Jill by decoding these MO discs and finding them locked in a cell in the basement laboratory. Your partner, either Barry for Jill's scenario or Rebecca for Chris's scenario, can be killed off if you make the wrong decisions. If they die, then the self-destruct system won't be activated and you won't have the second confrontation with the Tyrant who survives. The story really does feel like an action movie, especially with the finale against the Tyrant on the helipad. I really enjoyed unraveling the mystery, reading the notes the researchers left behind to add humanity to the monsters and a reality to the virus and its effects. And I know the Wesker twist really isn't a twist at this point. I doubt it was then either. No one has ever wore dark sunglasses indoors and been a good guy. But I still enjoyed his clear madness and evilness. To make this even more like a stupid action movie, beat the game in under 3 hours and you get access to the infinite ammo rocket launcher. And it is the most hilarious thing. Boom! Oh, what? That's so overkill. Woo! Yeah, boy, kablamo! Goodbye, limbs.
I was absolutely engrossed with all of this. I am so glad I finally just put my anxiety aside and went for it. You know, it's not just a pioneering game, it's a good game, and it makes me really excited to play the remake. But before that, why don't we try Resident Evil 2?
Hey kids, thank you so much for reaching the end. Either happy Halloween if I get this out on time, or safe and pleasant bonfire night if we're in November already. Don't forget to like and subscribe and follow me on Instagram and Twitter, links down below, and I'll see you next time guys. Goodbye.